Downtown Chicago, at dusk, painted the world in molten gold. Skyscrapers glistened in the fading light, their mirrored faces catching streaks of orange and red as the sun slipped behind the lake. The wind hummed with the rhythm of a city never truly at rest. Traffic horns blared impatiently, footsteps echoed on concrete, and the scent of rain clung faintly to the air after an earlier drizzle. Inside Marcelli's, it was a different world altogether. Soft jazz floated through the air, the sultry cry of a saxophone curling through candlelit corners. The clinking of cutlery and the murmur of conversation filled the cozy Italian bistro. The scent of rosemary, garlic, and oven-baked focaccia wafted from the open kitchen, wrapping itself around diners like an invisible welcome. At a small table near the front window sat a man in his early 40s, alone, dressed in a muted navy jacket and dark jeans. Expensive, but subtle. He cut into his fillet with precision, chewing thoughtfully, his dark eyes scanning the room with calm detachment. This was Alexander Reed, the unseen architect of the restaurant's success. Publicly, he was the CEO of Marcelli's, a chain of upscale but approachable Italian eateries known for their authentic flavors and warm ambiance. Privately, he was a man who had learned the hard way that trust filtered down, not up. Managers lied to protect their image. Regional directors smoothed over issues to avoid waves. If he wanted the truth, he had to sit in it himself. He chewed slowly, noting the temperature, medium rare, as requested. Good. But the wait time had been longer than acceptable. 17 minutes for a dinner entree on a Wednesday night? He tapped it into his phone under a generic memo titled Market Research. He took another sip of wine when movement in his peripheral vision caught his attention. A young woman brushed past his table in a blur, head down, shoulders hunched. She wore the Marcelli's uniform, black dress shirt, apron, slacks. Her name tag said Haley. Her dark brown hair was pulled into a low bun that had loosened throughout her shift, tendrils sticking to her damp forehead. The exhaustion in her gait wasn't just physical, it was spiritual. She disappeared through the hallway near the restrooms, shoving open a door labeled staff only, with more force than necessary. Seconds later, Alexander heard it. A sob. At first it was muffled. Then it came again, clearer, raw, desperate. He sat frozen for a beat, fork midway to his mouth. Most people would ignore it. Assume someone was just having a bad day, that it was none of their business. But Alexander wasn't most people. He stood quietly, leaving a few bills tucked under his plate, and made his way to the hallway. The moment he pushed through the staff door, the atmosphere changed. Fluorescent lights flickered overhead. The air smelled of bleach and overcooked pasta. The sound of laughter and clinking glasses from the dining room faded into a low hum. Haley sat on a narrow bench, wedged between a mop bucket and a shelf of plastic containers. Her arms were wrapped around her knees, her apron balled into a fist in her lap. Her shoulders trembled. When the door clicked behind him, she jumped. "Oh, you're not supposed to be back here," she said quickly, scrubbing her cheeks. "This is for staff only." Alexander held up his hands. "I'm not here to get you in trouble. I just heard you. Are you okay?" She looked at him, confused, then wary. "I'm fine," she muttered, clearly not fine. He didn't move closer, just leaned lightly against the wall. "I'm Alex." "Haley," she said after a pause. A beat passed. Her breathing slowly steadied. "I just—" She stopped, chewing the inside of her cheek before the words came out in a tumble. "I've been working every single day for the past 3 weeks. I pick up doubles just to make rent. But Clay, my manager, keeps giving all the best shifts to his girlfriend and her little clique. He says I'm not the right fit for Saturday nights. And when I asked why, he said something about my energy being too quiet. Like, what does that even mean?" Alexander stayed silent, letting her continue. "And now he's started making these weird comments about my body, about how I should smile more if I want better hours. Last week he touched my lower back when I walked by him in the kitchen. I flinched, and he laughed. Said I was too sensitive. Her voice cracked. I told HR. Emailed them 3 times. Nothing happened. Alexander's jaw tightened. Do you know what they told me the last time? She continued. That they'd look into it, and that maybe I should focus on being a more team-oriented communicator. He let out a slow breath. That's not okay. She laughed bitterly. Yeah, well, that's life. I'm just a waitress, right? Alexander finally pushed away from the wall and crouched to eye level with her. You're not just anything, Haley. You're a human being, and what's happening to you is wrong. She blinked at him, stunned by the sincerity in his voice. He continued, and if corporate won't listen, then maybe it's time someone with a little more weight made them. Her brows furrowed. You say that like you know someone. He smiled slightly. Maybe I do. Something about his calm confidence, the quiet certainty in his tone, made her sit a little straighter. I've got to get back to my tables, she said, standing quickly, voice still tight. I understand. She hesitated at the door, then turned back. Thanks for listening. He nodded once. Any time. As she slipped out, Alexander stood slowly, hands in his pockets. He'd come for a steak and a service check. Instead, he found a broken system and someone brave enough to speak up. He wouldn't forget her face. He never forgot the ones who told the truth when no one else would listen. The city at night was a symphony of shadows and whispers. Alexander Reed sat by the wide window of his penthouse apartment, overlooking Lake Michigan. The moonlight streaked across the water like a silver brushstroke, calm and deceiving. The same could not be said for his thoughts. The luxury apartment was polished to perfection. Marble countertops, sleek furniture, a liquor cart with crystal decanters. A carefully curated life. But as he sat in his leather armchair, with a glass of bourbon untouched beside him, none of it felt real. What felt real was Haley. Her voice played over in his head. Not the words, but the tremor in them. The helplessness when she said, That's life. I'm just a waitress, right? That wasn't just exhaustion. That was years of being made to feel replaceable. He stared at the glass in his hand and finally set it down with a sharp clink. He walked across the room, loosened his tie, and opened his laptop. It was time to stop pretending everything was fine. He pulled up the internal database, the real one, buried beneath layers of secured access that only C-level executives could reach. Clay Mercer, general manager at Marcelli's downtown Chicago. Hired 2 years ago. Prior history, short tenures at 3 other restaurants. 2 resignations, 1 termination with cause undisclosed. Alexander frowned. He dug deeper. Internal complaints. 4 in total. Each one vague. Each one closed with a single phrase stamped across the top. Insufficient evidence to pursue. All anonymous. He sat back and rubbed his face with both hands. That's corporate speak for, we don't want to deal with it. He pulled open another tab, typed in the HR department's private contact line, then another for legal, then a third for his COO, Nadia King, who never missed a beat. The subject line of the email read, URGENT, Review of Chicago GM Conduct. Immediate action required. He didn't need to say more. He had a reputation for calm, but when Alexander used urgent, people moved. He typed quickly. I need a discreet investigation into the conduct of Clay Mercer. Initiate review of HR handling of complaints from the Chicago location. There's a pattern. I want every complaint reopened and anonymized testimony recorded. I want a rotation of on-site HR starting this Friday, framed as a routine quality audit. No tip-offs to management. Full transparency to me only. By the time he hit send, the digital clock on his wall blinked 3:12 a.m. Outside, the city slept, but Alexander knew that this was only the beginning. He leaned back in his chair and closed his eyes. A waitress had cried behind a kitchen door. A CEO had listened. Now the wheels were turning. The next morning, emails flew across internal channels. HR departments coordinated behind closed loops. Legal reviewed employee records. Surveillance footage, once forgotten, was pulled and reviewed. Managers whispered behind their hands in nervous tones. By noon, Nadia called. "We found gaps," she said. "Enough to warrant escalation." "Escalate it," Alexander replied. "All the way." She hesitated. "You want full exposure? There's risk. PR, shareholder questions." "I'm not worried about the market right now," he said. "I'm worried about what kind of company we're building." Nadia was silent for a long beat. Then, "Understood." Meanwhile, back at Marcelli's, the air shifted. It started small. A woman with an HR badge appeared on a Wednesday and lingered in the break room. A regional manager, just passing through, asked pointed questions. An unmarked notepad left on the bar invited staff to write feedback. Clay noticed. He began pacing more, snapping more. Paranoia flickered behind his eyes like a storm on the horizon. He cornered Haley near the kitchen door one night. "You say something to someone?" he asked. Her stomach tightened. "About what?" "Don't play dumb," he hissed. "You think people are here for fun? This is my restaurant." Haley swallowed hard. "I just do my job." He leaned in, his breath sour. "Maybe do it a little quieter from now on." She didn't answer, just backed away slowly. But inside, something had cracked. Not from fear, but resolve. She had told the truth. And if they were looking now, it meant someone had listened. Someone had taken her seriously. She returned to the floor, shoulders squared, holding a tray full of steaming plates like armor. Across the restaurant, a couple clinked glasses of Chianti and murmured about the pasta. The world kept spinning, but behind the curtain, a quiet revolution had begun. 2 days after HR's unannounced visit, the energy inside Marcelli's felt off, like a string pulled too tight, ready to snap. The regular rhythm of the restaurant, the polite chatter, the rhythmic clang of pots, the soft laugh of servers between orders, had taken on a nervous, brittle edge. Everyone could feel it. They just couldn't name it, except Haley. She moved between tables with practiced ease, but her senses were on high alert. She noticed everything now. The way Clay paced with clipped footsteps, the way he'd begun micromanaging tiny things he used to ignore. How the silverware was rolled, how the menus were aligned, the way the kitchen staff barely made eye contact with him anymore. But there was something else, too. Hope. It had crept in like sunlight under a door. She first noticed it when Tina, the line cook who'd worked there for 5 years, suddenly whispered, "Hey, I heard he's being watched." Haley blinked. "Who?" Tina gave her a look. "Come on, you know." A flicker of disbelief danced in Haley's chest. "How do you know that?" Tina shrugged. "Someone from HR called me in. They asked about the stuff last winter, when Clay threatened to dock our pay for missing shifts during the snowstorm. I thought it was just gone, you know? But they asked me to tell it again, in detail." Haley's heart skipped. "They're listening." She nodded slowly, carrying that tray with a little more steadiness than usual. A little more pride. She didn't know who started it. But suddenly, people were talking again. Not out loud, but in whispers. In looks. In silent acknowledgments passed between shifts and under breath. Everyone had a story. About things Clay had said, or done, or overlooked. But now, those stories weren't just warnings. They were pieces of a case being built. And somewhere in the background, someone was collecting them. Meanwhile, across town, in a glass office overlooking the city skyline, Alexander leaned against the wide window, phone pressed to his ear. "Pull the last 6 months of scheduling data," he said. "I want to know if there's a pattern. Who gets the high tips? Who gets buried on dead shifts?" Nadia's voice crackled through. "Already on it. And Alex, it's not just bad management, it's retaliation." His jaw clenched. "I want a full audit. Termination packet ready by Friday. Offer severance if he doesn't fight it. If he does, bring in legal." Nadia exhaled on the other end. "Got it. What about the girl?" "Haley?" he asked. She's the one who opened the door, right? He was quiet for a moment. Keep her name out of the paperwork. If she wants to come forward later, fine. But we don't force it. We protect her. Understood. He hung up and looked out the window, watching the wind whip across the tops of the buildings. For the first time in a long while, he didn't feel like a CEO. He felt like a human being doing the right damn thing. Back at Marcelli's, Haley was wiping down table 9 when Clay approached her again. You think you're clever, don't you? His voice was low, almost a growl. She turned slowly. Excuse me? You know, he said, eyes narrowing, you think you're smart, getting people to talk, stirring things up. Haley held her ground. I didn't stir anything. People started telling the truth. You don't belong here, he snapped. This isn't the kind of place for little bleeding hearts like you. She met his eyes, square and steady. Her voice didn't waver. Maybe not, but it's also not a place for men who abuse power. The words hit him like a slap. You think they'll believe you? He hissed. I've run this place for 2 years. Haley's response was soft, but laced with steel. And I've lived with men like you for longer. Before he could respond, a voice called out from the other end of the dining room. Clay Mercer? Said a woman in a sharp navy suit with an HR badge clipped to her blazer. He turned, startled. We need a word, she said. He followed her, grumbling under his breath. Haley stood still, heart racing. That was the moment. That was the start. 2 days later, Clay was gone. No goodbye, no final meeting. Just an empty office and a memo from corporate. Effective immediately, Clay Mercer is no longer employed at Marcelli's. Interim management will be assigned until a permanent replacement is named Rumors Flew like birds let out of a cage. But no one cried for him. And that night, as Haley tied her apron, one of the newer servers, a shy guy named Mateo, walked past her and said softly, Thank you. She blinked. For what? For speaking up. I didn't even know we could. She smiled, heart fuller than it had been in weeks. We always could. Someone just had to go first. The next evening, as the dinner rush wound down and the last of the tiramisu was served, a familiar face sat quietly at table 4 by the window. Alexander Reed. In another world, he was still just Alex, the stranger who asked if she was okay. Haley spotted him and froze for a moment, unsure what to say. But then he caught her eye and smiled. And something about that smile, warm, real, tired but proud, told her the truth she'd started to believe. He had listened. And because he listened, everything had changed. For the first time in months, Haley walked into Marcelli's without bracing herself. The anxiety that had clung to her like a second skin, the tension in her shoulders, the tightness in her chest every time she clocked in, was gone. In its place was something unfamiliar, something she had almost forgotten how to feel at work. The restaurant didn't look different. The same jazz drifted from the overhead speakers. The kitchen still buzzed with heat and movement. Tables still filled with laughter and clinking wine glasses. But the air had changed. It was in the way people smiled more easily, in the way conversations flowed without a second glance toward the manager's office, in the way the new interim supervisor, a quiet woman named Darla, treated the staff like teammates, not underlings. Haley had just finished wiping down a table when Darla came up beside her with a clipboard and a soft smile. You've been doing great this week, she said. Haley looked up, startled. Oh, thanks, just trying to keep up. Darla nodded. Actually, I wanted to ask, how would you feel about training new hires? We've got 2 starting next week, and honestly, you've got a calming energy. The others already look to you. Haley blinked. Me? Train? Yeah, you've got good instincts, and people trust you. That last sentence landed hard. People trust you. Not long ago, she couldn't trust herself to speak up. Now, someone saw her as a leader. I'd love to, she said, voice soft. Darla smiled. Thought so. I'll mark it down. As Darla walked off, Haley stood still for a moment, absorbing the weight of that small promotion. It wasn't a title. It wasn't a raise. But it was recognition. And in this place, that meant everything. That night, she saw Alex again. He was seated at his usual table, dressed casually as always. No suit, no tie. Just a quiet presence tucked into a corner booth, sipping a glass of red wine as he picked at a plate of truffle risotto. She approached slowly, her notepad tucked into her apron pocket. "Back again?" she said, voice teasing. He looked up, a slow smile curving his lips. Couldn't stay away. "You know, if I didn't know any better, I'd say you were making this place a habit." He leaned back. "I have a thing for second chances." Her expression shifted slightly, curiosity mingling with understanding. Haley cleared her throat. "Can I get you anything else?" He hesitated. "Actually, do you have a moment?" She blinked. "Oh, um, sure. I just need to let Darla know I'm off the floor." "Take your time." She returned a minute later, apron unfastened, hair pulled back into a soft bun. She slid into the booth across from him, unsure why her hands felt slightly clammy. "I wanted to thank you," he said, voice quieter now, "for being brave." "I wasn't brave," she replied. "I was just tired of pretending things were okay." "Bravery isn't the absence of fear," he said gently. "It's moving forward anyway." She looked down, cheeks warm. "Did you really have something to do with what happened?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a business card. Haley took it carefully and read the name. Alexander Reed, Chief Executive Officer, Marcelli's Hospitality Group. Her breath hitched. She looked up at him, stunned. "You're—" He nodded once. "I didn't come that first night as a CEO. I just came for dinner. But then I heard you, and I couldn't ignore it." Haley stared at the card again. "You listened." "I had to. Not everyone gets the chance to see what their company really is when no one's watching. You gave me that." A long pause hung between them. Finally, she said, "Why me?" Alexander tilted his head. "Why not you?" Her eyes shimmered. Not with tears, but something stronger, something freer. "You're not what I expected," she admitted. "Good." They sat in companionable silence for a moment. Around them, the restaurant hummed, unaware of the conversation happening at table 4. Haley looked at him with new eyes now, not just as a man who held power, but as a man who chose to use it. "You could have stayed quiet," she said. "Most people in your position do." "I've stayed quiet before," he said, "and I've regretted it every time." She looked down at the card once more, then carefully slid it into her apron pocket. "Well, Mr. CEO," she said, rising to her feet, "your risotto's getting cold." He chuckled. "I'll take that as a cue." But as she walked away, he watched her, admiration in his eyes, because she had reminded him of something vital, that beneath the numbers and reports, behind the policies and handbooks, his company was made of people. And sometimes, the smallest voices could carry the greatest truth. A week later, Marcelli's pulsed with warmth and quiet energy. It wasn't just the scent of roasted garlic and fresh basil, or the clinking of glasses. It was something more subtle. A feeling, like a garden just starting to bloom after a long, hard winter. Haley stood at the hostess podium, watching the dining room flow around her like a well-conducted symphony. The restaurant was busier than usual for a Tuesday, but the staff had settled into a rhythm that felt easy. She wasn't used to easy, but she was learning to trust it. As she stepped toward the bar to grab water refills, Darla caught her arm gently. "There's someone here asking for you." Haley raised a brow. "A customer?" Darla smiled. "Not stairs. From corporate." Her stomach gave a nervous twist. "Did something happen?" "No, not bad," Darla assured her. "Just go up to the office. I'll cover your section for a bit." Heart thudding, Haley climbed the narrow staircase to the upstairs suite, reserved for regional check-ins. She knocked gently. "Come in," a voice called. It was Nadia King, COO of Marcelli's Hospitality Group, seated at the long mahogany table. She rose when Haley entered. "Hi, you must be Haley." Yes," Haley said, uncertain. "Is everything okay?" Nadia smiled warmly and gestured to a chair. "Very much so. Please sit." Still unsure, Haley lowered herself into the leather seat. "We've been following the progress at this location," Nadia began, "and I wanted to thank you. What you did, it took guts. Your honesty helped us right a ship that was headed for trouble." Haley gave a shy smile. "I didn't think anyone would care." "Well, someone did," Nadia replied, "and he made sure we all did too." Haley didn't have to ask who he was. "But that's not the only reason I asked to speak with you," Nadia continued. "We've been working on an internal mentorship initiative for front-of-house staff. Training, leadership skills, career development. It's something Mr. Reed has been championing quietly for a while. But your story lit a fire under it." Haley's eyes widened. "Mentorship? For people like me?" "Exactly. Starting with you, if you're willing. We'd like to offer you a chance to shadow some of our regional training teams. Paid travel, exposure to how our other locations operate. It's not a promotion, not yet, but it's a step in that direction." Haley sat speechless. The words floated above her like dream fragments. Paid travel? Mentorship? "I don't have a college degree," she said quietly. Nadia waved a hand. "Neither do half of our top managers. We care about grit, honesty, and leadership. You've got all three." Haley exhaled, a tremor in her breath. I'd love to try." Nadia smiled. "Good. I'll have someone from HR send you the details. We'll start slow, 1 week every other month. You'll still work here in between." Haley nodded, emotion catching in her throat. "Thank you," she whispered. "Really?" As she left the office, her fingers trembled around the railing. This restaurant had once felt like a prison. Now it was a doorway. That weekend, Alexander returned to Marcelli's, but this time not alone. His assistant, Maya, met him at the curb with a folder of updates and 2 phone calls waiting. "You're working on a Saturday now?" she teased. He smiled as he straightened his collar. "I told you, I have a new favorite table." Inside, the staff recognized him instantly this time. But there were no double takes or awkward stares, just respectful nods and quiet smiles. He'd become part of the place, even if his name sat above it. Haley approached a moment later, notepad in hand. "Let me guess," she said. "Risotto again?" "Maybe I'm the one stuck in routine," he admitted. "I doubt that," she said, grinning. "I heard you turned our little HR survey into a company-wide training model." He raised an eyebrow. "Word travels fast." "Especially when it's good," she said, gently placing a linen napkin in front of him. He glanced around the room. "It feels different in here now." "It is," she agreed. "People walk taller." He nodded, then paused, studying her. "And what about you?" She hesitated. "Still learning to trust the ground, but it's steadier now, and there's more ahead than behind." He smiled at that. "That's all we can ask for." She turned to go, but his voice stopped her. "Haley?" She looked back. He reached into his pocket and slid something across the table. A simple embossed keycard with the Marcelli's logo and a silver stripe along the side. "Just in case you ever want to visit HQ. Thought you might like to see what the view looks like from the top." She picked it up slowly, running her thumb over the edge. "I'm not sure I belong there yet," she said softly. Alexander's voice was firm. "You do. You always did." For a moment, their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them. Gratitude, respect, understanding, and maybe, just maybe, the beginning of something more. 2 months later, a cool spring breeze flowed through the narrow cobblestone streets of Boston's North End. carrying the scent of espresso, fresh bread, and blooming cherry trees. The golden Marcelli's sign hung proud and polished above the double doors. It had been repainted recently, now catching the light just a bit brighter. Inside, the restaurant was buzzing. A new energy pulsed through the place. The service had never been smoother, the kitchen more in sync, the laughter more genuine. And in the middle of it all, Haley moved with a grace that surprised even her. Not just because she had learned the steps, but because she now believed she had earned the right to dance. Earlier that day, she had returned from her first corporate training week in New York. She had visited 2 different Marcelli's branches, helped onboard new hires, led a workshop on mental health and burnout in customer service. And most shockingly of all, she'd been asked to present it again next quarter. On the flight home, she'd stared out the window with quiet disbelief, remembering the girl she used to be. The one who couldn't make eye contact. The one who cried silently in the alley outside this very restaurant. The one who almost walked away. Almost. It was just after 9 p.m. when she heard a familiar voice behind her. "Shouldn't you be relaxing after your trip?" Haley turned to find Alexander, dressed down in a dark navy sweater and slacks, hands tucked into his pockets. She smirked. "What, and missed the Saturday night chaos?" "Not a chance." He chuckled. "I was told the new assistant floor manager was here tonight. Had to see for myself." She raised an eyebrow. "I'm not a manager yet." "Not officially," he said. "But Darla said it won't be long. She's recommending you for promotion by summer." Haley blinked. "She didn't tell me that." He smiled. "She wanted it to be a surprise, but I may have ruined that." "I don't mind," she said, grinning. He motioned to a booth tucked in the back. "Sit with me?" She hesitated, then untied her apron and nodded. They slid into the booth, just like that first night, when things had been different. Harder. Colder. She studied his face in the dim lighting. There was a new ease to him, too, a quiet confidence. "You're not here just for the risotto, are you?" she asked. "No," he admitted, "though it is growing on me." She waited. "I wanted to see what happened when people were given the tools to thrive," he said. "Not just you, the whole team." "And?" she asked. He looked around the restaurant, watching Mateo joke with guests, Tina laughing behind the counter, Darla moving through the floor like a conductor leading an orchestra. "It's better than I imagined." Haley's smile softened. "It still doesn't feel real sometimes." "You know why it is?" he asked. "Because you didn't wait for someone else to fix it. You started. That's the rarest thing of all." She stared at him, unsure how to answer. "Why me, Alex?" she finally asked. "You could have listened and still stayed behind the curtain. Most CEOs wouldn't have even come back." He folded his hands on the table. "Because I've been in places where I couldn't speak up, where no one listened. I remember what that silence feels like. I didn't want to be another person who looked away." Her throat tightened. She hadn't expected him to understand so deeply, but he did. Maybe that's why he'd heard her crying that night, when no one else even noticed. "I guess we saved each other a little," she said. His gaze held hers, steady and warm. "Maybe we did." The restaurant quieted as the night wore on. Haley walked outside to lock up. The air smelled of lilac and rain. A soft wind tugged at her sleeves. Alexander followed, standing beside her on the sidewalk. "You know," he said, "you're allowed to dream bigger now." She looked up at him, a little surprised. "You don't have to stop here," he added. "You've got a voice people want to follow. That's rare." She exhaled slowly. "I used to think I had to stay small to survive. Now, I'm learning I can grow." "You're already doing it." They stood in silence for a moment, the city lights twinkling around them. Then he pulled something small from his pocket. A card, simple, white, but not like the last one. This one read, "Leadership Development Program Candidate, Haley Rose Grant. Track, Regional Operations, Fast Track Initiative." She took it slowly, hands trembling. "I'm not saying you have to take it," he said. "Just think about it." She looked at the card, then at him, and smiled. "I will." 1 year later, a new Marcelli's opened in Providence. The grand opening buzzed with reporters, cameras, guests, and a massive turnout from the community. At the ribbon cutting, a young woman stepped up to the podium, dressed in a tailored black blazer and a necklace shaped like a tiny key. She looked out at the crowd, took a deep breath, and began. "A year ago, I was a waitress crying behind a restaurant dumpster. Today, I stand before you as the general manager of this location and a mentor to young women who once felt voiceless. We are more than what we endure. We are who we choose to become." As the applause swelled and cameras flashed, one man stood near the back, watching quietly, a proud smile on his face. Alexander Reed, still undercover in his own way, still listening, still believing, and now, watching someone else rise.